Hi people, it's your special award-winning weekly webinar, Ideas with Beers, Transport in the Time of COVID-19, update 1st of December. So don't forget to email me if you want links and slides or give me information on that. Got a fact-packed and very dynamic session today with various presentations, so I'm going to whip through a bit quicker than normal. Right, so yours truly and Brian were at this event, the Active Travel Academy, which is run by Professor Rachel Aldred at Westminster University, and we got a special award for Ideas with Beers for Brian and Transport in the Time of COVID-19 update. And here you can see smiles from the judges, from Professor Aldred, Laura Laker, one of our favorite journalists, and David Fevier, media expert. Yes, we got this award. And again, thanks very much to not only everybody who's presented, but all of you who come along every Tuesday. So that was very nice. Okay, yes, here's some quotes from it. Brian and myself were shown some video clips that were made earlier. Ideas with Beers has almost cult status. It's a great place for people in active travel to meet and talk, an incredibly valuable resource. Bob's piece almost needs a theme tune and a proper logo, but we already have the Ideas with Beers proper logo. The chat runs parallel, an often robust discussion running at the same time, and it helps people navigate through the news in rapidly changing times. So thank you, Active Travel Academy, and all of you who nominated us. So general theme for today is the spending review. It looks to me like the spending review is even worse than we thought it would be for green transport. The cycling and walking budget for next financial year is £257 million. If the government is going to actually spend £2 billion during the term of this government, it should be aiming to have on average some 400 million per annum. And so far there's been the 250 for the current year, and with that 257 million, it'll have to ramp up quite significantly if that money is going to be spent. The next point is it's all in the context of the 27+ billion pounds on roads over the next few years. So you're kind of making some inroad into the alternatives to cars on the one hand and promoting car, van, lorry use on the other. There's a lot of subsidy for electric vehicles other than e-bikes that just get £1 million for a hire scheme. And the general suggestion has been that you need a total of £6 to £8 billion on active travel rather than the 2 billion we've got. So that's not that good. Here I'm using the animations. I do hope you can see these without too much delay. Article by Laura Laker, which is very good on setting up a low traffic neighborhood. And there's a competition. The Ranty Highwayman has got a competition going on what is your favorite infrastructure that can be lawfully cycled on in the UK now. And he's had a lot of entries for that, and he is going to run a competition. I couldn't quite work out how it works, but it's up to him to do it, and you'll all find out about that in the fullness of time. Do follow Councillor John Burke from Hackney. He's got a very good Twitter thread on the press coverage Hackney has received for its work on low traffic neighbourhoods and land transport decarbonisation. I mentioned the framework from Public Health England before. Now, for the next couple of weeks, we're going to be looking into the inquest of the daughter of Rosamund Kissy-Deborah in London. This inquest will be very important to see whether poor air quality can be legally attributed as the cause of death. So that's going to be in the news for a couple of weeks. Mentioned this last week about the deadline for new internal combustion engine vehicles. And because of people like the Ranty Highwayman, mobility scooters can now legally be used in cycle lanes. Air quality and COVID-19 again, some work suggesting that COVID-19 chances are increased with poor air quality. There's a guy called Jules Matson who's got a blog post there about why he likes low traffic neighborhoods. There's a Greenpeace petition which you should do. That'll be in the final consultations and surveys. Also something you can do that Cycling UK want you to do. And there's something on how cargo bikes are faster than vans. That's in the Spokesman podcast and also on the Pedal Me website. There's a lot there to read you should look at. Diversity issues, we now have a regular women's view slot by Sally Watson. Nothing else new. The delay slide is now where we are now after Friday the 13th of November. I'm going to keep on putting that up. Also specifically on Active Travel England, heard last week that it's not coming in for a while, and it was announced as the body which is going to be overseeing what goes in under Active Travel Fund back in May. It would be nice if it could come into being as soon as possible. Okay, on the ground in the UK, Edinburgh, council set to back down on controversial, interesting the way that controversial keeps being used in press reports. Something like route guidance systems, ways and so on, getting more cars and cabs and whatnot down side streets. That's not controversial, but low traffic neighborhoods for some reason is controversial. Portsmouth, another of those controversial, bike lane in Portsmouth scrapped after a farcical 3-week trial. Sam from the Manchester group had a thread on how he'd been sent plans for the Chorlton cycleway and he liked a bit of it, but he did worry about some features that didn't meet LTN 120. Now LT 120 has been used to oppose the design of a White Elephant Bridge. So that's it actually being used. Whether that comes through or not, we don't know. And Shropshire, there was a formal council commitment to supporting local transport note 120. As an update from Bike West Midlands. Now, this is my favourite slide of the week. This is from South Tyneside, and it's referred to by Kim Harding as the most pathetic greenwash yet. And what it is biodegradable taxi certificates. Yes. And what a photograph. Here you've got the councillor, you know, posing for yet another photo shoot for the local paper. And here's the guy all smiles from the local Taxi Drivers Association. And here's a bloke at the back who's obviously thinking, what a load of rubbish in Geordie. I won't do a Geordie accent, but I mean, it is pathetic. I did have a little smile though. Right, in London, dispute over Richmond's first protected cycle lane. Harrow have gone ahead with keeping their street space schemes. And in Ealing, drivers who contravene LTN measures could face a fixed penalty note of £130 or £65 if paid within 14 days. The majority of contraventions to date come from vehicles registered outside the borough. And that's a new sign there. Camera enforcement starts 7th of December. Let's hope there isn't use of illegal cloned plates, etc. That's a problem for ANPR and general camera enforcement. Right, the big story is the Kensington High Street cycle lanes coming out. I do strongly suggest you follow Last Not Lost. He ran a script to see the Kensington High Street traffic cam video, and he can't find any evidence of the alleged gridlock being used to justify it coming out. There's an article by Carlton Reid on what it's been about. Good thread from Simon Monk about how bad it is to take it out. George Freeman, a local Tory MP, says we actually should be having cycle lanes like this, which was good to see. Jeremy Vine's been getting stuck in, and this morning at 8 o'clock, there was a protest ride-in. You can see a video there. Whoops, video there of lots of people protesting. There was a suggestion, public notice states removal from the 2nd, but they may have begun on the 30th. That might be wrong, actually. That might have been a false tweet. They may not have started ripping it out early. Good Peter Walker article in The Guardian on what's involved. What's been really noticeable is a lot of the objections were from people who were sort of living in places like Florida or Georgia or East London, and a UKIP councillor from somewhere in Kent. So, you know, do read the Peter Walker article. It's a very hot issue. No reason for taking it out apart from just satisfying the bigots. So that's a struggle at the moment. We do hope that carries on. This is the usual catch up on things to read. Also on Wednesday next week, there'll be a Creating Successful Active Travel Neighbourhoods webinar for people up in Leeds. Yeah.
Bob, can you do me a favour? I'm just wondering if you're looking at like the slides, the next slide that's coming up, rather than the one we're seeing, because we're still way behind. Are you
on the one with campaigns, reading, etc.?
The one with Phil Goodwin now. You shifted on a couple of slides. Yeah, just like it seems to be moving, but like after
I'm moving around a bit. Yes, I'm just whipping through these. There are a lot of different things here. I don't want to refer to them each time. It's really for people to get the slides and go through them. I'm now on another one with Robin Lovelace's Twitter thread on how to make sure road closures and openings are added as quickly as possible to Google Maps. Although Simon Monk has doubts about whether that can happen. That's up at the top on the slide there.
Yeah, we're not seeing
the paramedics. Robin Lovelace at the top.
No, we haven't got that.
Can you click on to the next one and see? Because we think you're looking at the slide after the one.
Yes, I may be. Okay, so now I've got up tranche 2, now phase 2 allocations.
Now we're on Robin Lovelace.
Oh, now we're on Robin Lovelace.
Now it's
oh dear. Yeah, right. Well, and now I'm going on to consultations and surveys. So it's all a bit too late. Yeah. I just want to say there are 5 consultations and surveys you should be taking part in. Is that up? Or have I finished with you?
No, you're still on the trench one. It's showing us the... Now we've finished.
Okay.
Sorry, Bob, it completely wrecked the end of your session. But sometimes when you show a view, it shows you the next slide on your screen, and then for us, it's showing like there.
Have you got consultations and surveys up?
Yeah, we got that.
Yeah, well, on that, you've got a number of one on longer trailers, one on legally binding UK air quality targets, a Greenpeace petition, and Mums for Lungs have got a petition. Did you know that Sainsbury's, Asda, Waitrose are members of Logistics UK, used to be called the Freight Transport Association? And that's an organisation which has called the delayed 6 clean air zones across the UK a policy achievement. So there's a petition from Mums for Lungs that you could sign, and Cycling UK want you to get involved in asking for a temporary cycling space. And I am now finishing. Okay, so that's quicker than normal. Anybody have any questions on that? Anything they want? Anything they disagree with?
There was a slight point of order about George Freeman being an MP in Norfolk, but that's all I really picked up.
Where is George Freeman? Where's he an MP?
It's in Norfolk.
Oh, in Norfolk. Oh, I see. Okay, I'll change that.
It sounds like
righty-ho.
Do you want to go into your next one, or do you want me to bring Sally in now? Because I know Sally's got to leave early.
Let's do Sally, and then is Davies here? David?
Oh,
yes, he is. So let's do
Oh.
Sally, and then David, and then me.
All right. Well, let Bob get started. I think you're right. I think it was just a delay with it coming through. It wasn't anything weirder than that.
Yeah.
Sally, are you there?
I'm here. Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
The floor is yours.
Right. Can I share screen? Is that allowed? Did I find the right thing? There you go. I've only got one slide. Thank you very much to Brian and everyone for letting me come and talk. I'm not sure that I can give the woman's perspective, but I'll hopefully give a woman's perspective. And actually, hang on, let me just. Can you see that as a slide, as a presentation?
Yeah, you're all good. You're all good.
So for those of you who don't know me, I chair the Newcastle Cycling Campaign, but I'm also a researcher. I'm doing a PhD at Newcastle University in the School of Architecture, Planning and Landscape. And I'm interested in children and children's mobility and children's play. And I got involved with the Newcastle Cycling Campaign back in about something like 2012. And it's quite an unusual cycling campaign in that it was founded by 2 women in 2010, and it always had it always campaigned for changes to the environment, and always for sort of Dutch principles of transport planning for cycling. So we didn't really have to have that battle with people who wanted to campaign for maybe kind of less and smaller things. We wanted something really radical change. But we did always find that at meetings, we always had a lot more men than women. And the discussion last week kind of made me reflect a bit on that. How do you get more women to come and join Ideas for Beers? I don't know the answer to that, but I thought I would share some things that we've done that have really helped us broaden the campaign. One of the main things that we have an AGM every year, like most people do, and we often would hold it on an evening. We changed that to a weekend, to an afternoon. But also we thought a lot more about not only when we were going to hold it and where we were going to hold it, because previously we'd held it at a really popular cycling cafe down by the river, but this isn't a really great place to cycle back home from in the dark on your own if you're a woman. Holding it in the evening wasn't great for a lot of people, men and women who had kids to put to bed. So we picked a more central location and held it on an afternoon. And we've done it in the centre of town for a couple of years, but one year we decided to actually go out to different neighbourhoods so that people who lived really locally could come. And that might mean that fewer people might come from elsewhere, but Newcastle's a really small city. So I don't think it's really impacted other people too much. So in 2018, we held our AGM on a Saturday afternoon in Jesmond Library, and we also put on an activity for kids. And this is the highest attendance and the most sort of gender balanced to the most widest range of ages we've ever had at an AGM. We had something like 47 adults and 19 children. And I think our youngest was a tiny baby, and the oldest person who came was in their 80s. So one of the things that we wanted to do, though, was not just hold it in a different place and make it easier for different people to come, but it's also what we were going to talk about at the AGM as well. So that year we had politicians. You can see them at the bottom there in the middle. There was somebody from the Labour Party, a Lib Dem, and somebody from the Green Party, to ask people to ask questions of, and that was a really good opportunity for people to ask about what was happening locally and what they felt should happen. But this year, and I have to say, I hold my hands up, this year we did hold it on an evening because we've held it on Zoom, and that was difficult for some people to come, and I know it was difficult for some people to come because some of the people I'd invited to talk found it difficult to come. And we made sure that people knew that it didn't matter if their kids were hanging around in the background. But again, we hadn't sort of even, not quite as big an audience this year, even though it was on Zoom, but we had a much wider range of people who weren't necessarily there because they were wanted more cycle lanes necessarily, but they were involved in local campaigns to advocate for changes to their streets. And so I invited lots of people from different areas who were involved in very local campaigns and brought them all together. And that focus, that shift from talking about cycling just to talking more broadly about living in safer places, definitely broadened who we can target and who we can get involved in the campaign. So the other thing that I thought I would do in this 10 minutes is each week is just highlight somebody that I know or I follow on Twitter that I think other people should. And I don't think she's with us tonight, but you can see Claire Prospect here, who's my partner in crime at New Cycling. And if you don't follow her, I would recommend that you do follow her. And yeah, so to broaden that out, just from that's what we do in the campaign. What I'm also really aware of is that we're not, we're still targeting, our audience, I think, are broadly really middle class and quite white. And that's something that we need to change. And we have to do that work to do that change, though, and not just expect people to come to us on our terms. So that's something that we still have to do. But I think that the pandemic's shown that we can all suddenly change the way we all live and work, and it is possible to change. And I think if we're in an environment where we look around and we just see a lot of people who look like us, we should probably be thinking, well, it is possible to change that, but we have to do something about it. And what can we do? And yeah, so just broaden that out, I think it's also, I'm very aware, when I first got involved with the campaign, I had very young children, and it was incredibly difficult for me to always be taking part in engagement, the activities the council were doing in relation to new cycling infrastructure and changes to streets. And it still is, actually, because it's so time consuming and you have to jump through so many hoops. And I think those people who are putting together consultations should really think really carefully, what can we do to help people make it easy for people to take part? Are we actually, by introducing lots and lots and lots of different stages of consultation, are we actually just making it really difficult for people to take part? And then are we only left with those people who are very strongly for or very strongly against? And that's, I think, all I'm going to say. I'm going to stop sharing. So yeah, I mean, how do we get more people to take an interest in transport and cycling? Needs to be more, how do we include more people in discussions? And I think we do have to go to them. Thank you. I think that's all I have to say.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sally. So yeah, like I said, great news section, and I look forward to that every week. And I can see everybody's faces now. I don't know what I did they'll press to get that, but it's revelating, and everybody seems quite happy with that. Has anybody got any questions for Sally or any comments? All good. I can see everybody. I should get over that really, but thanks, Sally. That's brilliant. And yeah, we'll see you next week. Shall we go back to the 3 Daves and a Bob? Yeah, there you go. Sorry, Bob Davis and David Davies. Say that one quick. Are you guys ready?
I'm ready.
Good man.
Got my beer ready, so.
Nice.
Alcohol free. Do you want me to go, or are you waiting, or is Bob going to come in?
Yeah, I thought Bob was going to come in, but yeah, David, yeah, if you want to start off, that's great.
All right. Well, thank you very much for asking us. We published this report a couple of weeks ago, what kills most on the roads, and I've got a short presentation. I've promised Bob I will keep it short. If you want more information, we're running a webinar on it on the 9th, and I'll put that in the chat. And the full report is not long, so I would encourage you to have a look at it if you haven't had a look already. It's not the typical PACTS report, which might relieve some of you. So if I can successfully share my screen. Right. I hope that's not moved to slideshow. Come on. What have I done? What have I done? Well, you can see the slides, I hope. Come on, why is it not? There we go.
You're doing better than we normally do.
Okay, so what kills most on the roads? We published it 2 weeks ago. Oh my goodness, it's leaping ahead of me. Get back. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. So why this report? I think three things kind of persuaded me to that it was worth doing. The first was when we put in our evidence to the Transport Select Committee's active travel inquiry, and being PACTS, we like to put in evidence. And I looked through the reported road casualties for Great Britain, the Bible of road casualty stats, and it really didn't help me prepare what I was convinced was a good case to support active travel. And then the more I looked into reported road casualties in Great Britain, the more I thought it emphasised vulnerability and didn't at all tell the story about total deaths and those people killed by the vehicles. And the emphasis, I'm afraid, is on this chart 7. There's actually chart 6, which shows all casualties by mode, and it shows a very similar picture. But in our report, we've looked just at fatalities. And of course, you quick look at this graph, or this chart, and motorcycling stands out, which is probably no great surprise to anybody. This is people killed by 1 billion passenger miles. And after motorcycles, you get walking, and then not far behind, you get cycling. And the obvious takeaway to the casual viewer from that is that, apart from motorcycling, walking and cycling are, in quotes, really dangerous. Now, I know Bob will go into that, no doubt. But that is a simple takeaway. And that's, you know, not only the casual user, but I heard a few years ago, a European Transport Safety Council annual lecture, the head of their road safety unit show this graph for Europe and conclude from that cyclists were a real problem, and he was hinting very strongly about trying to introduce compulsory helmet wearing across Europe. Now that didn't happen, he's moved on, but it just reinforced to me that it is so easy to get that message from this chart. We're not saying this chart's wrong, but it's only one way of looking at it, and actually I think there's a lot of things that I would pull apart in sticking all these figures on the same chart, because I think it's comparing apples and oranges. So we did a short report looking at 2019 fatalities of Great Britain. I would emphasize, despite what some people have retitled our report, it's about what kills who, not who kills whom, or what kills whom. And it's not about causation. We're not looking into why these collisions occurred. It's not about fault or liability. And although we've had a bit of a dig at the Department of Transport, I would absolutely emphasize that this type of analysis applies to most other conventional road safety analysts and agencies. So If I didn't already, I beg your pardon. We produced this with my colleague Evan Webster, who is in the meeting today. Evan did all the clever stuff. He did the analysis with the stats and put the graphs together. And then we worked with a very good designer to turn them into something as attractive as possible. And we did some consultation with people like Bob and Jeremy Leach and others in the meeting to see if it was intelligible to them. And I hope we've come up with something which is reasonably intelligible and reasonably interesting. And if you look at this chart, contrast it with a previous one, you get a very different story, because instead of motorcycles coming out as the biggest bar, it shows very clearly that most deaths on the road involve cars. And about half of them are car users, and half of them are people killed in collisions with cars. And that is a simple takeaway from that. It's no great surprise, there's lots of cars around, but it kind of can get missed. That simple point gets missed. And then we did a chart by rates, which is equivalent to the chart 7 I showed earlier, but this time again, total deaths. Because if we want to sort of say, well, which mode is safe, it's not just for the user, but it's for other road users. And this is particularly relevant at the moment, when the government is saying, oh, don't go on public transport because you might get COVID. And the implication is you should drive. And of course, that doesn't take into account the risks to other road users. So we think this plays into the current debate very much. Motorcycling still comes out poorly, but it does show a different picture. And I just would emphasize, we've looked at passenger miles as the Department of Transport do. You could do it on the basis of vehicle miles. And I think the only difference will be really in relation to buses and coaches. And then again, looking at risks to other road users, the complete opposite of what the DFT chart 7 shows. Well, somewhat to our surprise, actually, vans and LGVs came out by far the worst, killing most other people per mile driven by van or LGV. HGV is not a great surprise. But second to vans, and motorcyclists close behind as a third. So then we did an analysis looking at vulnerable road users, motorcyclists, pedal cyclists, and pedestrians. And most of them, again, no great surprise, are killed by cars. We then also broke it down in terms of pedestrians, cyclists, and motorcyclists individually, and you're welcome to look at that in the report. We also then did a quick bit of analysis in terms of who is killed by cars, and it's principally pedestrians, followed by other car users. So, and again, we provided that analysis for HGVs. And we could have done it for vans. In fact, we probably should have done it for vans. We might do yet, but the figures are in the report, even if the graphic is not there. So by wonderful planning, I would like to say, slightly by fortuitous timing, we've also just published with our good friends Agilisis, formerly known as Road Safety Analysis, a constituency road safety dashboard. We haven't called it a road danger dashboard, we called it road safety to stick with our previous editions. But this time it shows not only the people that are killed by location, it also shows the other vehicle involved in the collision. So again, it clarifies what kills, or it shows what kills whom on a constituency basis, and that is available freely. It's on our website. It's available for all constituencies in Great Britain, not Northern Ireland. And we've had some good feedback on Twitter from that as well. We will be running a webinar in the 9th of December, 4 o'clock, about that. And yeah, if you've got any difficult questions, then I'll get Evan to answer. So thank you very much.
Brilliant, thanks for that, David. Yeah, really useful stuff. Got some interesting questions, but I'll let Bob come in first with his comments, and we'll open it up. Bob,
unmute and the share screen, and here we are. Have you got me?
You're in.
Okay, so there's a bit of background to all this, which I'm going to go into, because this is absolutely fundamental. Right, so let's take a look at these two jokers. That's Mr. Baker and Mr. Penning in the Conservative government, I think in the early 2010, 2011 around. So this is a comment by Mr. Penning, or Pennington, whatever his name was, a brief time he was the relevant minister for road safety. And no, it's Mr. Baker saying, I think that my colleague Mike referred earlier on to the rate per 100,000 of the population in terms of cycle deaths, and we actually come above the Netherlands. We've got a better record on that. So we've got a better record on road safety for cyclists than the Netherlands. Well, you know, this is so bleeding stupid. And of course, the reason why there are more people killed on bicycles per 100,000 of the population is because there are far, far, far more people riding bicycles. If you look at it with some measure of exposure, a rate-based approach, then you will find that it's lower. So that's the kind of stupidity you get here. And that actually even happened a little bit later with Transport for London. And we were sent a draft of their cycle safety action plan. And do take a look at this graph, this table here. What they're saying is, here we are again, pedal cycle fatality per million population, same thing, per head of population in 2012. And Oslo and Amsterdam are way up high, and Greater London and London inner and outer is lower. It's in yellow, it's good, it's much lower. And of course, this is just extremely stupid, because per head of population, whether per million or per 100,000, there are far more people cycling in Oslo and Amsterdam than in London. And so you get that kind of stupidity. So we've got to get away from that. We've got to at least go on to rates. Right. Then, so we know that measuring danger, the bad stuff, by totting up aggregate deaths is nonsense as a way of telling us how safe cycling is. In fact, the number of deaths may be inversely related. Sorry, that's wrong. Disregard that second sentence. It may be inversely related to danger. That's the wrong sentence. Sorry, it should be that you often get more danger and fewer people cycle, so the number of deaths go down. Anyway, we need to go further. So we raise the issue of who kills whom, a bit like what David's been saying about what kills whom. That's actually, the difference is that what is the type of vehicle rather than the person in charge of it, because then you have certain sort of legal issues about responsibility. I'll mention that in a minute. Right, the vulnerable road user. Here is my quote from the much underestimated feminist philosopher Mae West. Every man I meet wants to protect me. I can't figure out what from. So that's the thing about the vulnerable road user. You know, oh, I wonder what pedestrians and cyclists are actually vulnerable to. So we're going to the source of danger. We're going to where that danger comes from. Right. Because if you have victim-centered statistics, that tends to lead to a victim-blaming approach, in my view. What David was showing is that in his first graphic, that you have a big number for bicyclists, and this is suggesting there is something wrong with it, rather than the kind of behavior from other road users and the vehicles they're using. Okay, so I think we're on the same page with this, hopefully on the same slide. Here is your key article. It's on the Road Danger Reduction Forum website, and you do actually have to read your way through it. Yes, you do. Right, now here's a nice graphic. This is from SWOV in the Netherlands. Now on the left, you've got the slachtoffer, which is the victims here. And on the right, you've got the tegenparty, or the third party. So if you look at the victim being Fiats on bicycle here, along here, you see that there were 11 cases. Again, we're looking at deaths where another bicycle was involved. And guess what? You get car users involved in 64 cases, vans in 19, and lorries in 19. If you're looking at feats as the third party, the people who are doing the killing, you see they've been involved in 2 pedestrian fatalities, whereas cars involved in 36, vans 10, lorry 10. Bumped into 11 other bicyclists and involved in 1 motorcyclist being killed. But guess what? Didn't kill anybody in a car or van or lorry. So that is the kind of graphic we need to be looking at. Right. Now, I hope this isn't slowed down too much, but key points, you have to read my post. Remember, we're looking at deaths, not serious injuries or KSIs. So deaths is, as you know, a lot easier. You don't get underreporting of deaths, but on the other hand, you have very small numbers. So it's less easy to make statistical sense of them, and they tend to tell a slightly different story. The point I was making is that we're talking about the other vehicle involved. We're not talking about necessarily legal responsibility. Nevertheless, if you're talking about safe systems, the kind of approach that people do in road safety, you need to talk about the other road users involved in collisions where people get hurt. You also have to look at the kind of distance traveled. So, for example, I've seen on the chat, there's a bit of an issue about comparing the people killed in collisions with bicyclists and the people killed in collisions with cars. And the bicyclists aren't that much lower than the cars. Why is that? Well, the fact is a lot of other people who are killed are almost all going to be pedestrians. Motorists in cars do a lot of their mileage on motorways and also on rural roads where there are very few pedestrians around to get hit. Now, if you bring that distance traveled into it and look at what kind of distance it is, then you will see that the reason why pedestrians are apparently killed in roughly similar numbers in collisions with bicyclists as with cars, the fact is a lot of the motor car mileage is done away from those places where pedestrians are, whereas with bicyclists, it isn't. So what it all comes back down to is our, that's what I've just been talking about, is hope you can see that slide now. What it comes back down to is the potential kinetic energy dispersed on impact by mode. Right. So what that means is when you crash a car or a motorcycle into a pedestrian, there is far more kinetic energy dispersed on impact because of 2 reasons. Firstly, they have much greater mass, or what people normally refer to as weight, and potential kinetic energy dispersed on impact increases as the square of velocity. So when you're going at 30 miles an hour in a car, you're much more dangerous to pedestrians than you are at 20 miles an hour. And generally, cyclists don't go up to those high speeds, and they also don't weigh that much. So what we're drawing attention to is that the problem comes from the road users' potential kinetic energy dispersed on impact. And that's going to put cars and vans at the top, lorries to some extent, then motorcyclists and cyclists a lot further down. So the whole point is to draw attention to what's been actually cooled out of the discussion by the official road safety industry, which is, with the exception of people like David, which is to draw to look at victims rather than looking at the users of the more potentially dangerous to others modes, which are lorries, cars, vans, motorcycles. And this is my last slide coming up now. What this is all coming on to is, let's ask what we're worried about. Because another thing that comes up, and this was brought up in something that Max Glaskin referred me to a couple of weeks ago, is that when you look at the cyclist deaths in the Netherlands, you find a significant proportion are elderly people on e-bikes who basically just fall off because they can't handle the speed. They're going around a corner, it's a bit slippery, whatever. And the people writing papers like this say, aha, you're always going on about cars and lorries and vans. But in fact, a lot of pedestrian deaths involve pedestrians who are, a lot of cyclist deaths involve cyclists who are elderly falling off their e-bikes. Well, my view is, you know, I regard that as a different thing. It's a moral issue. The danger posed to me by the misuse or even just regular use of motor vehicles on my road or in my highway environment posing a threat to me is what I'm worried about. I'm not worried about me falling off an e-bike by myself. That seems to me morally a different issue. So the thing is, what we're trying to draw attention to is the power relationship here, both in terms of physics and also in terms of the wider society and politics. And that is to try and show what kind of other road users are involved in collisions where people have been hurt or killed on bicycles or walking about, and to shift the attention away from the victim onto the user of the more dangerous mode. And that's it.
Cheers, Bob. That's great. Actually, what we're going to do, Bob, because I've got another talker and we've got quite a lot to get through as well, I'm going to suggest that we do questions for Bob and David in the chat, and we can always pick them up at the end. But I really want to give the next section a proper run out. So you can hate me for that, but I'm making an exec decision.
I'll answer stuff in the Zoom group chat, as it says.
Cheers, Bob. Cheers. That was brilliant now, both of you. Really valuable work, and I know you've been going on about it forever, Bob, and it's great to see it happening and becoming mainstream.
Yeah, please look at the post that I've got up there.
Please do. Graeme, are you there?
Yes, hi.
There you go, mate. How's things? You all ready?
Yeah, it's my turn. I have a presentation to share.
You're on. The floor is yours.
Thank you.
Graeme's one of the smartest cats we've got in the Northwest, he says, from Hartford. But yeah, so it's going to be exciting.
Let's see if he can share his screen. Does that work? Can you see a full slide?
Yeah, you're all good.
Brilliant. Well, thanks very much, Brian, for the invitation to talk. And hi, everyone. Many of you I know. Some of those I don't know, my name's Graeme Sheriff. I'm from the University of Salford, from the School of Health and Society. I'm joined by two colleagues today, Luke and Harrie, who are going to talk about some current research. But my job is to set the scene a bit, to talk about our research team, talk about some research we finished recently, and then some research we're starting soon. And I think you'll see that they're linked. So our team is, hopefully that's moved on, I'm not having a lag on my slides. Our team is working across different aspects of transport. mostly with an emphasis on sustainable and active travel. We completed a study in 2018 on bike share in Greater Manchester, which was focused on the motorbikes, which many will remember we had in the city for approximately a year. But we've been running a seminar series of our own every 2 months, looking at different aspects of sustainable transport futures. And we've got one coming up this week, which I'll tell you more about shortly. But we've covered things like, well, bike share, but driverless cars, mobility as a service, equality, lots of different issues to do with sustainable transport. And at the moment, we're also looking into e-cargo bikes, which Luke will talk about shortly, low traffic neighbourhoods, which Harrie will talk about, and we've got an exciting Lime scooter trial starting on our campus, so we're going to be looking into that. So I want to talk, just quickly, here's a reminder about our seminar series, which is coming up on Thursday at midday, and there's a link there to register for it. We completed this study in 2018, looking at the experience of people using bike share and not using bike share for that matter in Greater Manchester. And there's a paper and a report published, which are all available on our website. The reason I wanted to talk about this today was partly because I've been doing a bit more analysis on it recently, and I've just sort of delving into the data a bit more, but also because it's quite relevant for the e-scooter study we're going to be doing, because it's all about shared micromobility. And I think there's things we need to look back on that study to help us inform how we design the next one. There's just a reminder of a motorbike. I'm sure you can picture one. And look, lots of people wandering around lively city centre. Do you remember that? In our study, we had quite a lot of respondents to an online survey, and we divided them up into 3 groups. We called them, I'm not sure that we ever found the best words for this really, but we landed on avoiders, who are people who have not used bike share and would not see themselves using it. Deciders, who are people who have not used bike share but would see themselves using it. And users, who are people who have used bike share. And that was done by us afterwards. We didn't ask people to say that, we just deduced that from their answers. And it was interesting then to look at how that was distributed across the population of people responding. And I'd basically say this is quite similar to the cycling population generally in terms of the general trend. So you can see at the bottom there, and apologies, there's a few graphs in this. I know you've seen quite a few already, but you can see that it's the younger age groups who are more likely to be in the green. So green are users, orange are deciders, and red is avoiders. I was pointing at my screen, but I realized that doesn't work very well, so I use my mouse pointer instead. And you can see that the older respondents are more likely to be in that avoiders group, and the younger people are more likely to be in the decider or users group. When we asked, when we looked at the difference between male and female, it's quite interesting because male and female were equally likely to be avoiders, so not interested in bike share. But female respondents were much more likely to be in that deciders group. So people who were open to the idea of using bike share, but for whatever reason weren't, implying that there might be some barriers that are acting on certain parts of the population, but not others. So it's interesting to see that that difference, and that also applies across the age groups. Don't try and take all of this in, but the kind of important message here, you've got 4 columns. You've got the whole sample of people responding, then you've got the, whoops, sorry, go back one. Then you've got the avoiders, the deciders, and the users. And what's striking here is that these top 3 reasons people gave for not using bike share more than they would like to are concerned about safety, not wanting to arrive at the destination sweaty, and the weather being off-putting. And also below that, I don't know which routes to take was also a barrier. These will be very familiar to anyone interested in active travel, because these are the kind of common barriers to cycling. So what we can tell from that really is that one of the main reasons people weren't using bike share more were the same reasons that people don't cycle more. So any claims that bike share was making that it's making cycling more inclusive, we would have to question. But it also shows that deciders group here, if you can see the pointer, the orange group, were much more likely to say they were concerned about safety when cycling in traffic. But those are the people who are open to the idea of using bike share, but for whatever reason not doing so. So if the cycling environment was improved, that would imply that they'd be more likely to use bike share. So it's showing the importance of the cycling environment when it comes to bike share. Excuse me. Also, I'm just picking out a few kind of graphs from this now, but we asked people if they use bike share, did it replace another mode of transport? And this is one of the criticisms, I guess, that's levelled against bike share schemes and against shared micromobility, is it often replaces walking, and we did find that that was the case. However, there were reasonable percentages of other modes, so people saying that there were cases when they used a bike instead of a car, which is great in terms of reducing emissions and reducing the number of vehicles on the road. So the report's available on the website, so please have a look if you're interested in more detail or ask me. This is some more recent analysis we've been doing where we've taken the male and female split and looked at those barriers. These are the same barriers as we were looking at before. Apologies, this is a colour faux pas in that I've now used the same colours for male and female as for deciders and users. It's an absolute crime. But now change the key in your mind. Orange is now female and green is now male. So what you can see here is really quite striking is that, so what you're seeing is, for example, look at the bottom one, 59% of females responding said they were concerned about safety when cycling in traffic and gave that as their reason for not using bike share more than they would otherwise, but only 31% of males said that. Similarly, the weather being off-putting and not knowing what routes to take is also quite clear. So it's really striking how much more prevalent those established barriers are amongst females answering the survey in comparison with males. And that's something we want to look into more with the e-scooters research. So I'll just talk about this one really quickly. If you look at the second level down, we asked people what factors would make them less likely or more likely to use a bike share bike. And one of the ones we asked people about was whether they could hire a helmet at the same time as a bike. And nearly 40% said they would be less likely to hire a bike if they couldn't also hire a helmet at the same time. And hardly anyone commented they'd be more likely to be. We put that out there really as something that may concern people when they're using bike share. We're not taking that as evidence that we need to provide helmets with bike share bikes or that helmet needs to be compulsory. However, there's a perception that people may perceive that they should wear a helmet and therefore won't use a bike share bike if they can't hire a helmet. And it may as clearly linked to perceptions of safety and those expectations about good infrastructure and low traffic volumes, because if those were addressed, people may feel less likely need to hire a helmet. However, it may be a barrier to using bike share and indeed e-scooters. So that's all interesting, and I hope it will be valuable as we're rolling out the next bike share scheme in Greater Manchester, which I believe is coming next year. So on to e-scooters now, which arrived on Salford's campus in October. And we have the Lime scooters as part of the Department for Transport 12-month trial. This was generously provided by Salford City Council today. This is a map of where they are at the moment. Depending on how well you know the area, you'll be able to see this is Peel Park. This is the A6 coming through Salford, and this is Salford's University campus. So at the moment, this is stage 1 of the trial. It's fairly well, it's focused on our campus, but there's plans in stage 2 and 3 to roll it out. Pun not intended, to roll it out to Media City and then further around Salford, so it becomes a trial across a larger part of the city. So we're fascinated to see what will happen with this. A very quick look at some of the issues that have been raised about e-scooters. So one of them is that this is positive, this is an alternative to the car, so we should be embracing it, and that's clearly what DFT is doing in having these trials, and that's great. However, people are raising concerns, and that's something we want to really understand in this research. So PACTS have, for example, argued that they may harm active travel, and the argument being that either they may entice people away from public transport, from walking and cycling by offering a different mode of transport, or they may make it less attractive to walk and cycle if they're seen to be littering the pavements, or making that environment feel more dangerous. There's concerns about people who are visually or sensory impaired, and that's clearly a serious concern that needs to be investigated, because we obviously all need to be able to share the pavement and road space. And then at the bottom here, they're concerned about them being, well, in the words of the headline, a menace to other road users. So I think there's clearly massive opportunities, but there's also big challenges to address with this new mode of transport. So some of the things we want to understand through our research is who's using them, why and for what purpose, how do they fit into existing and new travel plans? Are people using them instead of other modes of transport, as well as other modes of transport? What's it like to use e-scooters, and how is this experience influenced by infrastructure and road space allocation and pavement space? How are scooters impacting the streetscape and the people using it? And what is the impact of scooters on vulnerable people, both positive and negative? And you may be surprised to see the positive bit at the end there, but the positive thing is they are a form of transport. They could be mobility aids, they could increase social inclusion. So there are potentials there for a very positive impact. So that's my quick overview of healthy active cities and a bit of signposting towards some research we're going to be doing over the next 12 months. I'd now like to hand over to Luke to talk a bit more about the project on e-cargo bikes. Or I'm happy to do questions first. I don't know how you want to do it, Brian.
Let's roll through and we'll do the questions at the end, I think.
Great.
Great, thanks for that, Graeme. I'll just get my screen shared up as well. Hopefully everyone can see that. So yeah, thanks again to Brian for inviting us to speak tonight. Just to follow up from what Graeme sort of laid the groundwork for, really, I want to talk about one of our current research projects, which is looking at cargo bikes in Manchester. So the project's called Delivering the Last Mile, Scoping the Potential of E-Cargo Bikes. Just to give you a bit of a background, I want to sort of overall give you a bit of a whistle-stop tour, really, of the study, but to give you a bit of context. It's an EPSRC funded project, and we got funding to basically do sort of a scoping study looking at e-cargo bikes in Manchester around, over about 3 months. We got the funding, I think, back in January, February, and then we planned to sort of carry out the study over the summer, which is what we did. The idea was to look at the sort of opportunities behind e-cargo bikes, the challenges, and ultimately the potential of the bikes for a range of different sectors, but looking at sort of businesses, small and large, organisations, community use, individual use. As I said, it's Greater Manchester focused, and the way that we did it was that we arranged 5 interviews with what we called e-cargo bike pioneers. These were effectively people who are using e-cargo bikes already in some capacity within Greater Manchester or just beyond. They're the people that sort of have got experience of riding the bikes, experience of managing the bikes, all of the things that go on around the operation of the cargo bikes. And then we also organised 5 focus groups, which looked at different sectors across Greater Manchester, different business sectors. And we sort of encouraged a group discussion about how they could see the role of e-cargo bikes within their individual businesses or their sectors, more broadly thinking. As I said, we got the funding for this back in about January, February. But it's, you know, we can't lie that COVID-19 has been an unavoidable context to see the lens of this project through, really. And it's come with its challenges in terms of carrying out remote research, which I think was a bit of a learning curve for us. But it also came with its benefits, which I'll talk about a little bit, but sort of through the initial first national lockdown, the sort of slight changes in people's behaviours we saw around active travel, pop-up cycle lanes, boost in cycling and walking due to the restrictions that were in place, and how that sort of all feeds into wider perceptions of the role of e-cargo bikes. I feel as though I don't have to spend a lot of time on this slide thinking of who's in the audience tonight, but this is an e-cargo bike for those people who might not have seen one before. It's built on the sort of original design of a cargo bike, which doesn't have the electric assist engine in. The electric cargo bikes, of course, have those electric assists in to help the bikes go further, faster, and carry heavy loads. But basically, the idea of a cargo bike is that it's a specialized bicycle to carry sort of heavier goods. And that usually means that they sometimes are a bit bigger than a conventional bicycle, and they usually have a sort of a freight storage unit either at the front or the back of the bike to carry those loads and move them around. So the research questions we were sort of interested in looking at really was sort of firstly looking at what is the potential of e-cargo bikes to reduce the impact of freight delivery in urban areas. How can the bikes potentially contribute to getting vans off the road effectively and replacing that sort of fossil fueled traditional delivery aspect. Then we wanted to have a look at the sort of the barriers to e-cargo bike uptake, whether they're perceived, actual, how they might be overcome, how they can be reduced, and more curiously as well, look at what those barriers might be. You know, are the barriers to e-cargo bike use shared with cycling, or are they e-cargo bike specific? You know, or is there a middle ground there where there's some barriers are shared with more traditional cycling and some are very specific to the operation of cargo bikes? And finally, wanted to look at how road and cycling infrastructure can accommodate a significant increase in e-cargo bikes. So what are the features required of infrastructure, whether they're on the road or in the services sector or in organisations themselves, and how can these facilitate a significant increase in e-cargo bike usage? So what I want to do now really is just give you a bit of a broad overview of the key findings that we found from the study. So the first one we found was sort of coming from pretty much everyone we spoke to really, it was that there was a real sense that e-cargo bikes have potential to start with. Businesses see the value in the bikes because they can contribute to a smaller carbon footprint and a greener company image. But also in relation to practical benefits for certain businesses that have certain delivery commitments that they have to do, that they can see an e-cargo bike being a much more efficient vehicle to do those kind of deliveries for, particularly within the last mile. In comparison to conventional bicycles, the larger frame and the electric assistance offer a way to carry larger loads easily. This removes a barrier that has often been associated with cycling, which is about sort of concerns for personal fitness. And this is a barrier I think we're seeing e-bikes also sort of challenge and potentially remove for people coming into cycling for the first time or considering whether or not they have the physical ability to ride a bike safely and confidently. And in comparison to electric vans, they offer lower running costs and can potentially help reduce congestion on the roads, and then ultimately toward looking at cleaning up air pollution and contributing to a positive movement toward climate change. And we also saw that there were opportunities to integrate e-cargo bikes into delivery practices to capitalize on their potential for last mile deliveries in the context of freight. So this was looking at sort of how businesses or organizations who might often regularly order similar bulk purchases. This idea came through local authorities really, who have often have multiple buildings, let's say in Manchester city centre, and they are often ordering bulk orders of the same items, let's say, for example, stationery, pens, pencils, papers. They'll often, at the moment, organise those deliveries on a sort of building to building basis, resulting in multiple vans doing multiple individual deliveries to different sites. And so there was a question about whether or not these kind of bulk orders can be sort of uniformed, and whether or not e-cargo bikes can play a role in sort of delivering these and making that sort of sector of city centre delivery more efficient. The second point really was about barriers. So we're saying barriers to e-cargo bike use are shared with conventional cycling. There are definitely some barriers that are specific to e-cargo bikes, but one of them being the initial capital cost and investment. E-cargo bikes are expensive, and this sort of came back through and throughout the study really in different forms, that initial capital cost is seen to be a barrier. Storage is potentially a barrier. The bikes are big and heavy. And then there's the charging aspect as well, sort of making sure that they're charged up overnight or throughout the day, or whatever the best way of doing it is, making sure they have access to a mains. People said that more leasing schemes could be required, so that people can trial the bikes and see what they look like and offer. So one of the biggest barriers really is people don't know what e-cargo bikes are. People may not have seen one, they may not have heard about one, they don't know what they look like or what they're capable of. So how can we sort of encourage more leasing schemes to give that more direct access for businesses and individuals to make sure they've got access to the bikes and try them out and say, oh, this could be for me, I could see how we could use this. There are different challenges specific to the different uses of e-cargo bikes. So for example, the catering sector expressed an interest in using more bikes, but also expressed concerns about food delivery and the logistics involved in that. So how can we keep food warm? How can we deliver sort of large bulks of food while keeping them warm? One catering company we spoke to was saying, you know, sometimes they are catering for 500 people. It's very easy for them to cook it all in one batch for the chefs, put that entire load in a van, move it out in one go. But they are keen to see how they can make that sort of chain more sustainable, and they would be open to using e-cargo bikes, but there'd be potential changes internally within their own management. If they were to do that, for example, they'd need multiple e-cargo bikes in a fleet to take out large orders in one go, or they'd have to stagger food production in the kitchen so a bike can go out, come back, pick up, go out again, come back and pick up. And so yes, there's multiple challenges sort of across different businesses around how the cargo bikes can fit into that element. And yeah, that's sort of just what I said, the size of the event really can determine the feasibility of e-cargo bikes. And that's something that businesses would sort of have to think about on an individual one-to-one basis, really. We found that e-cargo bikes are more than just technology. They don't reflect a straightforward substitution in technology. So for example, going back on what I just mentioned, you can't just swap an e-cargo bike for a van and then carry on as normal. There's a lot of other sort of slight changes involved in that decision that have to be considered. Businesses need to be able to adapt to these new technologies, and delivery patterns, for example, will need to be changed. Delivery operatives will have to have skills and training in cycling to feel confident and safe on the road in order to, let's say, take someone out of a van and put them onto an e-cargo bike. Quite a few things have to go on along, you know, within that process to make sure that it happens smoothly and safely. And going back to the cost implications of the initial investments of e-cargo bikes, you know, they can feel like a risk to some businesses when compared to tried and tested technologies. So, you know, for a big, good quality e-cargo bike, you can be looking at anywhere between £2,000 and £5,000. That's getting into the arena of second-hand van territory. Businesses know that vans work. They've been tried and tested for decades. They're more, you know, they're very comfortable in perhaps considering them as an option, whereas they don't know what an e-cargo bike is potentially. They don't know what the bikes can give to them. So again, we're going back to that awareness and education needing to improve when it comes to the bikes. And just a comment really that came up through one discussion with the company who exclusively use the cargo bikes as part of their delivery service, that they might not always be as flexible as conventional bicycles on the road because of their size and weight and because they're carrying heavier loads. The size of the bikes can sometimes mean they can't filter through traffic easily. And so that would mean that the bikes are ultimately subject to the speed of road traffic. And what this company that we spoke to actually said that their drivers often prefer to choose the smaller bikes in their fleet so they can go out, they can deliver less, but they can go out more smoothly, guarantee their delivery times, filter through traffic easily, or get into the dedicated cycling lanes if they're available, and do it that way rather than taking out the bigger bikes, carrying more, but potentially not being able to filter through traffic safely and ultimately running late as a result. We found that technology is really a key when it comes to using e-cargo bikes in sort of business operations. Rider tracking and online shops improve efficiency and help to make the bikes a realistic consideration for businesses. And technology is really a key part of this ecosystem. So whether it's from setting up online shops, which a lot of businesses have had to look at doing this year, to using the cargo bikes for deliveries themselves, and then the apps, the tracking technology, the route planning software, the remote payment facilities that are all involved in that chain of command around using the cargo bikes in connection to online shops. It also came up that social media and communication technology is essential, particularly for two of the volunteer-led cargo bike delivery schemes we spoke to in the study. This was their way of engaging with businesses, saying, you know, now you're moving to an online shop because everything's closing down. Do you need deliveries? Can we support you in that? People were getting in touch with them over social media, and they really used this to be able to engage with their riders and also engage with the businesses. And just a point that sort of came up about the potential for having electric charging stations for all kind of electric vehicles on the streets, including e-cargo bikes, and what that potentially could look like. Support for businesses is vital, we found. As I said, not only will businesses compare the initial investment to potentially the cost of a van, where there is a more developed second-hand market, but they'll also consider the risks of training staff and rethinking their own delivery practices. There are opportunities to try the bikes, or we need more opportunities to try the bikes and adapt business practices, and perhaps these should therefore be policy priorities. But in terms of businesses as well, we found that the lack of current licensing around e-cargo bikes sort of potentially widens their accessibility. There was a great quote that came up that said a big upside of these vehicles is that they aren't licensed at the moment. In a way, we really don't want them to be licensed because that allows a large proportion of the community to actually use them. Just to push on the education and awareness, really, awareness of e-cargo bikes is needed, and their potential usage continues to remain low in the UK. And so more trial schemes and e-cargo bike libraries are needed for people to understand their potential and how they might use them, as well as offering solutions to the initial barriers of cost and size. For people who might not know what e-cargo bike libraries are, they're kind of they're run by different organisations, and they're essentially a collection of e-cargo bikes that can be accessed and potentially trialled or rented for low cost or free. And the organisation running the e-cargo bike library can sort of provide a lot more information on the bikes themselves, or support for businesses, incentives that might be involved to help give everyone all of the information they would need access to help make informed decisions about the role of the bikes. And just to point out a really nice quote about the stage we're at in terms of awareness of cargo bikes, one of the interviewees we spoke to said, it's rather like going up to somebody who has ridden a horse all their life in 1920 and saying, what you need is a car. And they go, a car? What's a car? That's the stage we're at with e-cargo bikes, is that we're still sort of challenging that initial awareness barrier. So that sums up the 6 key findings from the study. I just wanted to finish on a bit of a positive note, really, before I hand it over to Harrie. And this is just one of the volunteer-led cargo bike schemes that got set up during COVID-19, during the first national lockdown, by a group of residents in Todmorden in Calderdale. The project's called Cargo Dale, and it basically came out of a resident who found herself self-isolating and suddenly realised that businesses were all going online, and she didn't like the idea of her streets becoming saturated with vans and delivery vehicles. And so she thought, how can we sort of make a dent in this, a positive contribution to it? So she rented an e-cargo bike from a local supplier and started setting up her own cargo bike delivery company, where she engaged with local businesses and started doing deliveries through lockdown, and found that this not only took vans off the roads, because businesses and individuals were contracting them to use the bikes to deliver the goods, but it also ensured that vulnerable people were getting access to goods and services throughout lockdown. So it's a very interesting case study of how the bikes can be used, small scale, but quite interestingly. So thanks for listening to me sort of to go through the key findings, talk about the report. There's plenty more to talk about, as you can imagine, and we're sort of going to be fleshing out some of this in our webinar on Thursday, which Graeme mentioned earlier, and I think Harrie put the link into the chat earlier. And we're hoping to publish the report on that day as well, launch it on Thursday. So if you're unable to join us for the webinar on Thursday, please visit our website on Thursday and you should be able to get access to the report there. But thank you for listening, and I'll now pass you over to my colleague, Harrie.
Hiya, is there time or are we running out of time?
There is time. It is getting tight, so I've asked people to ask questions in the chat, but I definitely want to hear from you, Harrie, so well, let's get going.
Let me share my screen. How do I do that?
Oh, you've lost a minute now already.
Yeah, it's just the green button in the middle, Harrie,
Right.
where it says, got it?
No, really, we should have given you a whole session, but you've done a good advert for the upcoming session next week, I will say. But yeah, Harrie, I definitely want to hear about this one.
So this is kind of, we don't have much research data at the moment. You can hear my dog squeaking her toy. But this is kind of just the preliminary stages of our research on low traffic neighbourhoods. So we're looking at the low traffic neighbourhood kind of as a lens to look at walking and cycling interventions, and develop a qualitative baseline. The funding's part funded for the research is through TFGM, so obviously they're very interested in it. We're looking at Salford, Trinity, the Heatons, Urmston and Levenshume as our case studies. And we're kind of using multiple methods. So the one that's most developed is Twitter scraping. So basically, if you are talking about low traffic neighbourhoods or active neighbourhoods on Twitter, I am collecting all your data. So this is kind of what I'm doing. So you can see a few of the tweets down the side, but basically I go through every 10 to 12 days and I collect all of the tweets using a program. So this is active neighbourhoods. Active neighbourhoods is quite a nice one because it's so Greater Manchester specific. I think I really like this kind of this word map because it's kind of this. So this is all of the tweets on active neighbourhoods, positive and negative. But actually, what you see is that people, no matter kind of what they're saying about them, they are kind of saying the same thing in terms of people. The project, it's about streets, consultation. So that, I mean, people have very different perspectives, but actually when you kind of get it down to the different things that people want to engage with, there is some similarities. And the plan is to look at these. This is kind of just working out how we can use these tweets, but we're going to do some discourse analyses of them. And also you can do kind of these wider quantitative sentiment analyses. So we are we're gathering all of the tweets now, and we kind of look at the sentiments within them, and you can come up with a number of how many are positive, how many are negative, and we're looking at how that changes across the next 6 months probably. I think a lot of you probably know I'm very interested in disability and active travel. So one of the things that has come out a lot in the tweets is disability and kind of people using disabled people in their arguments. A couple of quotes from tweets on the right hand side are from disabled people on Twitter that were responding to my findings and kind of saying that they feel that disabled people are being used as a political football. So I think that's one of the areas that we're definitely going to be developing around. I think just an interesting observation just from myself, and also to think about when you are talking about active neighbourhoods and also active travel, is that I think there's the perception that actually this comes from people who are kind of against low traffic neighbourhoods, and they're the people trying to utilise disabled people and disabled narratives within their work. But actually, these are some conversations on Twitter. One of them is with me. So this is the one on the left-hand side is me pointing out that the planters are going across the pavement. And actually, if you're talking about accessibility, it's not just disabled people driving. You need to think about accessibility in terms of the different mobility aids. And so I'm being told that, you know, why am I not looking at pavement parking? Why am I talking about this, basically? So actually, as a disabled person, I'm trying to point out the issues and have my voice heard, but I have people who are also proactive travel shutting me down. And then it's the same on the right-hand side. The woman tweeting is a wheelchair user, and she's talking about the issues that she has with cycles, share scheme cycles in the pavement. And once again, she's being shut down. Why aren't you talking about pavement parking? But actually, she's in London, so pavement parking is much less of an issue. And it's kind of, if you keep shutting people down like this, and yeah, you just need to kind of listen and reflect upon your own kind of actions as well. So that was just an interesting thing that I've come across recently. And then that's it really in terms of the work that I've been doing so far. So let me stop sharing that. The only other thing that I wanted to say was I'm doing a crowdfunder that's about community e-trikes in Greater Manchester. So I'll share the link. We've got over £10,000 at the moment. So yeah.
Brilliant, brilliant. I kind of wanted to give you a full half an hour on that topic because it's kind of summarises what we've been going about for the last 33 weeks. So that was brilliant. So anybody got any questions for all three of the brilliant speakers? Or I'll just go through my questions before we finish off and do my executive powers.
Just to think quickie, I mean, we could, do you want to invite Harrie back for another week?
Yeah, I think we'd all like to hear more on your research, Harrie, if you would join us, like another session. No offense to
Yeah,
you.
maybe in a few months' time, and then I'll have a bit more to present, hopefully.
Yeah, that'd be brilliant. Well, it's just absolutely right on the money. So, thanks for that. I'll ask a couple of questions, and I wanted to ask Graeme. And this is like the worst question you can ever ask an academic, but any early nod as to how the research has been going? A few observations you can share with us? Good or bad?
With the e-scooters?
On the e-scooters,
yeah. I've heard it's going very well in terms of student uptake, actually, which is great to hear. We've seen, others will have seen as well, a few tweets of examples of vandalism, but very, very few examples so far, which is reassuring. But yeah, all stories are very positive about how much they're being used on campus, which is great considering that we've been in a lockdown as well.
Yeah, I'm hearing positive stuff from Newcastle as well, but yeah,
good
negative ones out there as well. Yeah, that's good to know. And I've got a quick question for Luke as well, like really about how soon we roll this out. I remember being involved in my first e-cargo trial in Camden. Probably about 12 years ago. We were kind of pushing it. It's just how long do we keep having to make the case, and when will it roll out, and how do you think freight will actually transition to this? What kind of percentage of the freight market do you think we've got the potential to be up to? That's a massive question when we're already out of time. Yeah. But Luke, I know you've got the brain.
I'll quickly answer that in 5 seconds. Yeah, I mean, it's a good question about the rolling out and the scaling up. How long is a piece of string, I suppose. I know TFGM are launching the e-hubs project next year, which will be sort of a big step forward with regards to that. If people haven't heard of the e-hubs project, it's effectively a bit of an e-cargo bike sharing scheme that's going to be available to sort of members of the public and businesses in Manchester, different areas of Manchester. In terms of its impact, or in terms of its potential for different businesses, it really does vary at the moment. And I think that's one of the things that we came up during the study, is that smaller businesses have probably got a much bigger sort of use. Smaller businesses can potentially have a fleet of e-cargo bikes, just simply through the sense that they're smaller businesses and they move goods across smaller distances, or they're moving a smaller amount of goods around. When you start moving into bigger business, particularly sort of freight orientated businesses, then the application of e-cargo bikes potentially changes. And so we talked to a lot of people who work at hospitals or universities, have these sort of big sites, saying that they could really see e-cargo bikes used on sort of a bit of an internal basis, so moving stuff around sort of on site, as it were, rather than doing deliveries from a distribution centre to people's houses. So one of the things we're really keen really for this study, as I said, it was only 3 months long, is we wanted to get a quick snapshot of what's going on with the e-cargo bikes, and then ultimately use this data to build into a much more in-depth study about, potentially getting bikes into the hands of businesses and really doing some sort of quantitative analysis on how the bikes are being used.
All right, good man. Yeah, no, it's all sounding good. Go on, Mark.
So if you've got time, if you get in touch with Brighton and Hove City Council, I'll put the address in the chat, where Brighton's basically got about 10, 11 e-cargo bikes of different types, and they're doing a project which they've distributed to businesses. I'm not sure if the businesses get to keep the bikes at the end or not, but they're different types, and they're doing it as a sort of internal research project. Some of the bikes are council departments, so the council's post room, the parks department, and so on. Others are external businesses like Brighton Gin, who are doing gin delivery by cargo bike. So that I'm sure they'd be interested. Daniel Bianco at the council.
Okay, yeah, that's really cool. Actually, that is that's something I forgot to mention. Is the government funded local authorities to purchase a fleet of e-cargo bikes at the start of this year. So I can't remember the exact number, but I think maybe about 15, or I might be way off, but a certain number of local authorities bid to get money from the government to purchase a fleet of e-cargo bikes to either support local businesses or use the e-cargo bikes as part of daily operations for the local authorities. And Brighton Hove City Council were one of them, because I wrote about them in the report. But yeah, thanks for reminding me to flag that up.
Yeah, please. I'm sure that I'm on the steering group for it. So if you want the contact, just let me know externally.